Okay, I did this in class very quickly today, and it's been suggested that maybe I just go through it a little more slowly. Um, in the field of stoichiometry, what does it mean to be a limiting reactant? And the answer is the one that is completely used up or consumed. Right? The limiting reactant, the one that none is left over, nothing left, nothing left. Well, excess reactant is the leftover. So here's one where you have more than what you need to do the chemical reaction. So it's the excess, the leftover. Okay, the leftover reactant. Number 3. Use the following balanced chemical reaction to answer the following questions. And it says 4 aluminum chlorides combined with 3 lead 4 oxides to produce 2 aluminum oxides and 3 lead 4 chlorides. Okay, nice. Part A. If the reaction begins with 40 molecules, so I'm going to put a 40 here instead of 4 of aluminum chloride and 40 molecules of lead 4 oxide, so I'm going to put 40 here to match the sentence. Which reactant is a limiting reactant? Justify your answer either by explanation or calculation. So this is a balanced chemical reaction. So let me remind you, that means if I have 4 aluminums on the left, I have 2 times 2 is 4 aluminums on the right. If I have 4 times 3 is 12 chlorines on the left, then I have 3 times 4 is 12 chlorines on the right. If I have 3 leads on the left, I have 3 leads on the right. If I have 6 oxygens on the left, then I have 6 oxygens on the right. It's a balanced chemical reaction. These coefficients are what it takes to make this work. So it says for every 4 molecules of this combined with 3 molecules of that, I create 2 molecules of this and 3 molecules of that. If I bump it up by a factor of 10 and say, okay, instead of 4, I'll give you 40. Well, if I give 10 times as much for each one of these, then it's all still balanced and I can make 10 times as much as what I started with here with the 4323. But instead, I gave you 10 times as much as this, but I gave you more than 10 times as much of the second reactant. Instead of giving you 30, I gave you 40. So really, I'm giving you 10 extra excess molecules. So now I can answer part A. Which reactant is the limiting reactant? AlCl3 is the limiting reactant. Of course, it's nice if you would write complete sentences, right? And then why? Maybe because you have more PbO2 than it can use to react with. Okay, so there's my crude written explanation as to why the answer is aluminum chloride. Part B, using the conditions from part A, how much of the excess reactant did you use and how much remains left over? Justify your answer. Wow, I already kind of did the math verbally. So I said 4 times 10 is 40, okay? 3 times 10 is only 30 of these lead 4 oxides. So how much excess of reactant is used? 30 PbO2 molecules are used by those 40 aluminum chloride molecules, semicolon, and how much remains left over? Well, if I start with 10 and I use 30, I'm sorry, I didn't start with 10, I started with 40. If I start with 40 and I use 30, then 40 minus 30 is 10 PbO2 molecules are left over unreacted, unused. Ta-da! That answers part B. Part C, if the reaction begins with 100 molecules, so over here, I'm going to write that on top, 100 of these guys and 120 of the second guy. Okay, so 120 of the second guy. Which reactant is the limiting reactant? And justify your answer. All right, so 120 divided by 3 is 40, so a factor of 40. But here, 100 divided by 4 is just a factor of 25. Well, 25 is less than 40. So I'm going to be limited on my aluminum chlorides once again. And therefore, AlCl3 is the limiting reactant. Same reason as before, which you should write out and say, because you have more lead 4 oxide than it can use. Part D, using the conditions from part C, how much of the excess reactant used and how much remains left over, justify your answer. Wow, so I can only use 25 times my original values. My original value for the lead, for the aluminum chloride was 4. 25 times 4 is 100. I'm going to use all of them. I can only use 25 times of the other reactant, and I'm only going to make 25 times of each original product value. So that means 100 plus 75 is going to yield 50 plus 75. Yikes. So I'm going to use 75 lead 4 chlorides. And in part D, I would say 75 molecules of PbO2 are used, semicolon. And if I start with 120 and I use up 3 times 25 is 75, then what's left over is 25 plus 20 is 45 molecules of PbO2 are, go ahead, say it, excess. Dun, 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 dun. This concludes this little in-class worksheet.